everyone. Welcome to the EMVision portion of the conference. This is my favorite part of being on the conference committee and my favorite session at the conference. We have a group of wonderful speakers for you today, and our first speaker is Soraya Sutherlin. Soraya leads the Emergency Management and Crisis Communication Division of Emergency Management Safety Partners, is an instructor for the National Center for Biomedical Research and Training, and serves as the Public Affairs and Communications Chair for the California Emergency Services Association. So, welcome.
All right, by a show of hands, can anyone tell me that they feel confident if you had a catastrophic disaster today, your systems, your people, would they be able to perform public alerts and messaging well? Okay, maybe I should leave. Should I go now? How about when your disaster starts to expand beyond jurisdictional boundaries? What if time mattered? Some of you in this room today may have already experienced this. So let me tell you a story about the incident that changed the entire trajectory of my career. It was a typical Tuesday morning, sunny, 65 degrees, winds out of the east at 7 miles per hour. I promise this isn't a recruitment speech to move to California. But you see, the morning of Tuesday, February 18th, 2015, wasn't your typical Tuesday. At 8:51 a.m., the ExxonMobil refinery in Torrance, California, had a near-miss catastrophic explosion. It shook with such intensity that it measured as an earthquake. However, the explosion itself was the least of our problems. It became about communications. What had happened? What was in the air? Who or what agency was in charge? Who was responsible for messaging? How do you message if you have no verifiable information? Do you wait until you have something to say? Does your community know what to do in certain situations? I learned a harsh lesson that morning. Information delay can be catastrophic because everyone, thanks to social media, is an instant journalist. You better tell your story, and it better be coordinated. We have standardized terminology, and we even have purchased expensive technology to assist us. Yet these systems still operate in silos, often lacking training, coordination, and they're limited by jurisdictional boundaries. The problem is the community, and frankly disasters for that matter, don't care or know about these limitations. Yet the community at large relies on us to tell them what to do when they're in danger. But there's a larger systemic problem we aren't addressing: cross-jurisdictional integration and coordination with public alerting. And until we address the root cause of those issues, we will continue to make national headlines on how our emergency alerts failed to reach our communities. And let me tell you, it is never a good day to make a national headline with a disaster. But on February 18th, I found myself standing outside as the sky started to rain potentially toxic ash. I was the emergency manager for the city of Torrance when the ExxonMobil refinery exploded. Initially a 3-alarm fire, there were reports of injuries, missing people, and concerns over radioactive material, which only further complicated our response. Despite the systems that we have had in place for decades, even court-ordered by a consent decree, we failed to meet the public's expectations in our community and the communities that surrounded us. I realized in a split second we were not ready for an event of this magnitude. Limited by jurisdictional boundaries, our emergency alerts, they stopped at our city borders. As chemical ash rained down on playgrounds, schools, and neighborhood gardens, we struggled to get consistent information from the refinery. It highlighted what we all knew but rarely experienced. We needed integrated communications between all jurisdictions so that no resident was left without warning. So 6 years later, these moments have been forever imprinted into my memory. So I decided I was going to change that narrative. It started with a vision to bridge 14 siloed systems, 14 separate city entities into one unified alerting program where jurisdictional boundaries no longer mattered. True integration with one voice. The messaging would be specific, clear, and direct, joining all response entities under one umbrella. The goal was to educate, inform, and become one alerting authority. With the click of a button, we would notify every resident in an impacted area, minimizing issuance delay, using every modality we had in our toolkit. It had never been done before, at least not in our model. But through sheer determination to at least not make a national headline and do better than we had done before, we created Alert South Bay, an integrated regional public alert and warning program. Our mission was simple: the right message to the right person at the right time based on incident impact and not city borders. But listen, this wasn't going to be easy. We had to radically change the way we were thinking about emergency messaging. You see, shelter in place means something different to everyone, we found out. Evacuation warnings versus orders mean very little to the average person. We have standardized terminology, yet we've done very little to educate our community of what that actually means. Second, we all had to get on the same page. So if you know anything about the South Bay, we are a coastal community primarily, lots of inland areas. But in our coastal communities, we have an average of a 3-foot setback, which during COVID, that was a little bit problematic when we needed to be 6 feet apart and we literally had that between homes. We have 7 miles of beautiful coastline. We have 7 petrochemical refineries, the second largest mall in America for my shoppers out there, Los Angeles World Airport, 2 major earthquake fault lines, and LA County has roughly 10 million people. The South Bay covers 10% of that population. So back to my recruitment speech, who wants to move to California now? Anyone? So we really needed to figure out what cross-jurisdictional meant, because based on my beautiful description, we all essentially live on top of each other. So how do we coordinate a message when it happens on a city border? Who's responsible for messaging? But more importantly, how do we write messaging that accelerates that milling process so that when that resident receives that message, they actually respond to take action? So we decided we're going to follow some basic rules, okay? If you see it, if you hear it, if you feel it, or you smell it, you better be messaging about it because your community certainly wants to know. Lastly, we needed to develop standards and training and criteria for all jurisdictions to follow when sending emergency messaging. There needs to be a clear chain of command and clear decision-making process. And the way that we did that was through developing a regional SOP. It's defined what was sent, when and to whom, and it allowed for us to develop this common operating picture framework pre-crisis before that disaster happened. Because the reality is, disasters aren't going away. They're getting more frequent and they're increasing with intensity. The new word of mouth has changed from days to hours to microseconds. Our communities want instantaneous information. There isn't one solution, but a myriad of improvements that need to be developed and implemented, both technical and social. So it begins with you. Let us not recreate the mistakes of the past. We can and we must do better. Your communities, they're counting on you.